Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we have to talk about how Rivian is in a little bit of trouble, or potentially a lot of bit of trouble. Before getting this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below, and if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post this content every single day. Let's get into it. Let's start things off by going over the big headline figures, and then we'll do kind of like a deeper dive into what is happening. So, over the last 4 quarters, Rivian has lost a lot of money. In quarter 4 of 2021, they lost $2.46 billion, and since then, they've lost about $1.6 to $1.7 billion per quarter, which amounts to a massive amount of money. And on top of that, they're having a lot of production issues. So their main factory that's supposed to produce about 150,000 vehicles per year was basically expected to produce a lot less this year, around 50,000, and now it's expected to produce even less than that, around 25,000 vehicles. So they're losing money and they're struggling to produce as many vehicles as they'd hope. And on top of that, their stock is down by about 75% since they went public. And so, yeah, people aren't really as interested in investing in Rivian as they were when it initially, again, went public. Now, let's first talk about the vehicles that Rivian produces, because this might explain why they are struggling. So the two main vehicles that they produce right now is the R1T and the R1S, and this is for the public at least. And one is the truck, that's the R1T, and the other is an SUV, that's the R1S. And they're basically just like off-road luxury, fully electric vehicles. And I've actually had a chance to review several R1Ts. I haven't had a chance to review an R1S yet, but what I can tell you is they're actually pretty impressive. Acceleration is strong, interior fit and finish is really good, and most of the tech works most of the time, which is just something you kind of have to expect with a lot of these EVs because they have a lot of tech. And so when you compare it to a lot of other EVs in the market, those two vehicles are actually really solid offerings. And then obviously they do build the fully electric vans for Amazon. That is something that's going to be ongoing for quite some time because, well, they have a huge order to fulfill with Amazon, but that's not something that you can, I guess, just go in and purchase from Rivian, because until they fulfill all those orders with Amazon, I don't imagine they're going to be producing vans for anyone else. And speaking of Amazon and their vans, this is actually something that is really helping out Rivian, because it's making it so that regular people are taking the company a lot more serious compared to other EV automakers, because Amazon's such a big company and they have such a big order with Rivian. And so you see, normal retail consumers going and buying Rivians because they're like, well, if Amazon trusts them, then I should. And, again, if Amazon's invested in the company, then maybe I should be invested in the company. And then on top of that, you have other businesses that are, basically putting in pre-orders for future product that Rivian will produce, because again, they're like, if Amazon trusts Rivian as a business to do business with, then I will do the same. So with all this investment in Rivian, then this actually puts them in a position where they still have quite a bit of cash on hand, or at least that's what they claim. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit more towards the end of the video. But with all this cash on hand, they're basically saying that they can weather the storm. That yes, things are difficult right now as they are ramping up, right? They're having growing pains, but once they get past these growing pains, they're going to be extremely profitable, just like Tesla. And well, Tesla is actually a great example to compare to Rivian, because they were not profitable for a very long time. It's not until recently that they were actually profitable. And now Tesla is insanely profitable, way more profitable than a lot of traditional automakers. And so, well, if Rivian does things right, then that'll put them in a position similar to Tesla, where they are, not only selling a ton of cars, but selling a ton of cars at a massive profit, which is something that, they'll love as a company and their investors will love as well. But of course, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. First off, with the Amazon vans, Amazon seems to be happy with the vans so far, but until the entire order is fulfilled with Rivian and Amazon, it's too soon to tell exactly like how good this relationship is going to be. Because again, right now Amazon's basically just telling Rivian, hey, these are the things you should fix on the van, and Rivian is of course fixing those things on the vans, and then moving forward with production. But until every single van's delivered, and until we've seen like extensive testing by Amazon with these vans to determine if they really are going to be reliable over the long term, that whole situation is definitely up in the air, because if Rivian messes that up, then chances are other companies are not going to want to order these vans. And I see that there is massive potential for Rivian with these vans, because, after they complete this Amazon order, if everything goes really well and they show that these vans are not only reliable, but, they could potentially save the company money because they're more efficient than, gas-powered cargo vans, then maybe, FedEx, UPS, just other large, companies that basically use vans will start ordering from Rivian instead of, the traditional van makers that they order from. And so there's potential there, but there's also potential that things could go really south. Like if the vans turn out to be just complete pieces of junk that break down after a few years and it costs Amazon a bunch of money, well, RIP Rivian in that case. Now on the consumer product side of things, so the R1T and the R1S and the other vehicles that Rivian has planned for the future, this is also something that's up in the air. So first off, just like the Amazon vans, right, reliability is a big question. Rivian hasn't been around long enough for us to know if their product is actually going to be reliable, or at least reliable enough for their, main consumer base to be okay with the vehicles. I mean, Tesla's a great example. Their cars are not all that reliable. They have tons of issues, but the Tesla buyer base is okay with those issues, obviously, because Tesla continues to sell more and more cars every single year. And yes, their cars get better as time goes on. And so, maybe Rivian buyers will be more okay with that. But I also think that Rivian's going to have less margin for error, because Tesla is allowed to make a bunch of mistakes because they're always on the cutting edge. And, they were like the first big EV automaker. So people are like, yeah, it's okay if my Tesla has issues because, again, we're on the forefront of technology. Whereas with Rivian, it's like, okay, you're just like a wannabe Tesla automaker. And so unless your product is better than Tesla in every single way, including reliability, why should I buy your product over Tesla? And so that's another thing. It's just the product quality over the long term for consumers. And the next thing is there's a pretty big chance that we're going to go into a deeper recession. A lot of, outlets are still saying that we're not in a recession, whatever. I'm not going to argue that point, but if we do go into a deeper recession, you are not going to see demand for vehicles like the R1S and the R1T. So unless Rivian is able to release a much more affordable vehicle within the next 6 to 12 months, there's a chance that they might not have the buyer base that they think they have, because there's a big difference between someone that has, a deposit on a vehicle and someone who has actually taken delivery of a vehicle. And so, yeah, they have a bunch of pre-orders. I think it's like over 100,000. But if we go into a really deep recession where people aren't really buying fancy luxury items like the R1S and the R1T, then that 100,000 might turn into, 50,000, 25,000. And then Rivian's going to have a bunch of issues because they have all these vehicles that they thought they were going to build that they no longer have the demand for. And then the next big thing that Rivian has going up against it is that lack of profitability that we talked about earlier in the video. And yes, everyone understands that with, big tech companies like Rivian, it obviously takes time for them to become profitable. And I mean, frankly, there are really big tech companies that still aren't profitable to this day, but somehow are still around. It makes no sense, but it's the world that we happen to live in today. But again, I think that there is a lot less margin for error with Rivian compared to an automaker like Tesla, because Tesla took like a decade roughly for them to become profitable. But again, they're on the cutting edge, whereas now Rivian, again, is basically a Tesla mimic. And so since they pretty much have a blueprint in front of them, everyone, including the investors, is kind of expecting them to figure out things a lot quicker than Tesla. And so I imagine if they aren't profitable within the next, year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years, people will probably give them a decent amount of time, but not nearly as much as the time that they gave to Tesla, then you're going to see even more pullback with investors from Rivian. And then if you have a big enough pullback with investors, then you have the public that's scared to buy from the company because it's like, well, what if this company does go under? Then is my vehicle actually going to be covered under warranty and all that kind of stuff? Because, well, if a car company goes under, good luck with your warranty claims. So the point I'm trying to make with this little clip is that Rivian needs to be hyper focused on getting to at least a state where they're not losing nearly as much money as they're losing today, or some level of profitability, even if it's not massive, just something to show that they're a for-profit company and not one of these pump and dump tech stocks. Speaking of pump and dump tech stocks, this is another big issue with Rivian, or a potential issue, I should say. Now, I don't think that Rivian is going to be the next Nikola, where the CEO basically just cashes out after things start to light on fire, because, well, Rivian, first off, actually has a vehicle. Nikola never actually produced anything. That being said, though, we have seen a chain of tech companies over the last couple of years just completely disappear because they were basically just Ponzi schemes. Again, I don't think that Rivian's doing that because, again, they've got backing from Amazon. They're actually building vehicles for Amazon. They're actually building consumer vehicles. So, like, they are a real car company. However, again, just like most of these tech companies, until they actually reach profitability, you always have to kind of question, like, what is the actual motive of the person that started the company? Like, is this actually to build like a profitable car company? Or is this something where they knew that if they just, kind of got things started up and moving at a certain rate, that they would get enough people to buy in to where they would be able to cash out themselves and, become uber rich, right? You always got to question that. And this is where I want to bring back that point of Rivian saying they have a bunch of cash reserves. Now, we have to, take Rivian for what they're saying. Like, we have to just, again, give them the benefit of the doubt that, hey, they do in fact have a lot of cash reserves. But again, we have also had the situation where a bunch of other tech companies have said, we have a lot of cash reserves. And then all of a sudden, once poop hits the fan and they need to actually use those cash reserves, then they come out and say, we don't actually have cash reserves. So that's another thing where I would just be super skeptical. Like, are those cash reserves actually real? Again, I'm not trying to just accuse Rivian of random things. I just I feel like after these last couple of years, with everything that we've seen with some of these tech companies, like I personally would rather be a lot more skeptical than just, believe everything that these companies are saying. So to pull everything together, Rivian is hemorrhaging a massive amount of money, and who knows how long this is going to last for. Now, they've only been producing vehicles for like less than a year, so I guess we kind of got to give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll eventually get to profitability. But I mean, it's crazy that the company's been around for 10 years and it's taken them this long to actually produce a vehicle. But, things do move slow in the car industry. And so, yeah, again, time will tell in terms of how long it'll take for them to get to profitability. And I think that they've got a pretty big shot. Again, Amazon is definitely helping out. And the fact that they have really good product for consumers is also helping out. Like the R1T and the R1S, again, I haven't reviewed an R1S yet, but I've reviewed several R1Ts. Amazing product. Like, I think they look pretty cool. The interiors are fantastic. They drive amazingly well. Like, compared to a Tesla, like, they're so much better. Like, Tesla has no chance against Rivian when you compare product to product. The only thing that Tesla has over Rivian, frankly, is just the fact that they have better charging infrastructure. But Rivian just completely blows them out of the water on every other front. And so, again, I do think they have a really good chance of making it through everything that we're about to potentially go through. That being said, though, and this is just my personal opinion, I do think that there's a chance that Rivian could go out of business if the economy gets bad enough. Because if the economy gets bad enough, I don't see people purchasing EVs. I see them purchasing cheap gas-powered cars because, well, that is the cheapest form of transportation that can be produced at a mass scale currently. And so they're probably not going to be purchasing EVs, and they're probably definitely not going to be purchasing luxury EVs, and that ultimately is all that Rivian builds. And so, yeah, if we go into a deep enough recession, if we go into a depression, then, yeah, probably RIP Rivian. And I guess if that actually happens, then we'll see if Rivian's cash reserves are actually real. But it's one of those situations where I really do think it's a little bit too soon to tell. But we'll just see, and if I get any big updates, I'll give you guys an update video. But I want you guys to let me know what you think about the whole Rivian situation. Do you think that this company is going to be a mainstay in the EV world like Tesla, or do you think that it's just something that's around for today but probably won't be around tomorrow? I'll see you guys.